In a fantasy adventure film, I would expect to see a fictional world of mysterious creatures and settings as something that I couldn't find in the real world. For example, Hogwarts, Middle-earth or the Labyrinth. Insanely impossible yet beautiful buildings, structures and settings, unlikely amazing plots that are obviously fictional yet are totally believable for modern day fantasy films, but for older fantasy films, they were so fantastical that they became unbelievable, although that is what they are known for today. Also, I'd know them for their intricate costumes, the props, and for more recent films, CGI. The fantasy genre, since its conception, has been fascinating to audiences and fans with impossible plots and settings, but over time, the genre became more believable and enticing without changing the plots and settings. Mostly thanks to CGI, without the need for trick photography and puppets, it leaves more freedom for the camera crew and complex roles like puppeteers aren't needed. The film industry as a whole has grown immensely since the dawn of the fantasy genre, so with bigger budgets and the rapid development of technology, most things that need complicated techniques before CGI can all be added in post-production, so that production is much more fast and efficient.
In the scene I'm going to show you soon, in that scene they use low-key lighting to match the lighting of the moon, which is in that scene. It makes the scene seem more like dark, whereas in the Dark Crystal it's lighter and like more surrounded light, so you can see everything. Use pretty much the same type of camera angles, like they both use close-ups, wide shots. They both have a reverse. Oh, was it a shot? Reverse shot. Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you, Charlene.
Yeah. They use in Pirates of the Caribbean. They use the POV shot where Miss Turner is looking up towards the moon, and you can see the sails and the moon. In this scene, there is many different sounds I can hear.
In this level 1 class.
During this scene, they use many different sounds. There's many different sounds that you hear, like the squeaking of the mast.
I'm
sorry. You said it was squeak. Would you say creaking?
No, they creak.
The creak, right?
Because squeak is like a mouse.
I'm sorry, I won't laugh again, I'm sorry.
Right, in this scene you can hear loads of different sounds at different times, like the creaking of the mast, the waving of the sails, and the sound of the crew being like ordered around. Whereas in the Dark Crystal, they use like different recording levels. So like you'll hear the roaring of the crowd, which is dialogue, is it? Because you can see them in the shot, so that'd make it dialogue, wouldn't it?
What, the roaring of
diegetic, I mean.
In sync, isn't it?
Oh, when the crowd's like screaming.
No, when you can see the crowd as with the sound they're making, it's diegetic,
Isn't
isn't it?
in sync as well, or something like that?
I don't know.
I don't really know for that specific film, but some films like they put it in after, and some films they put it in. They're diegetically.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, like you hear the roaring of the crowd, and you've got the ringing of when the swords hit the stone in the Dark Crystal. I have no idea what that scene is, by the way. Just letting you know.
Just type in fight scene on YouTube.
There's also like a low, deep sound of music and a loud echoing dialogue, which they tend to have in that scene.
So for my two films, I chose The Labyrinth and Harry Potter, The Deathly Hallows Part 2. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But firstly, for Labyrinth, as with most dialogue in films, there's a lot of cutbacks between the two subjects, or well, the weird puppets and
shot reverse shot.
Jim Henson. Oh,
thank you for that. Okay, appreciate that. Cheers, Charlene.
Again.
Again. The shots are mostly split between wide shots and mid shots, but the scene opens up firstly with a tracking shot of her approaching the two puppets with foreheads, and then who I've taken to call her gatekeepers. Then a series of cutbacks between the two parties, like I said, when there's dialogue, and then as she approaches them later on, there's a tracking shot which shows all the subjects being the puppets and her. And then she walks through one of the doors and disappears down some trapdoor thing. Whereas in Harry Potter, it was a much more advanced thing, obviously, because 30 years ahead. first there's an establishing shot of the ground with the Death Eaters gathering and the students like closer to the camera, and then shows. So the Death Eaters are waiting for the students more or less to surrender, I think, in the story. But it shows like a wide tracking shot of the students approaching the ground, and then it shows a lot of crowd reaction shots from the Death Eaters and the students, showing the seriousness of the situation. There's a wide shot after a while of Neville emerging from the crowd to give his speech to address his fellow students. Yes, his name's Neville Longbottom. They laugh at that in the scene. Overall, the scene consists of mid-shots to show dialogue and aerial shots of the grounds to show the situation, what's going on with the Death Eaters and the surrender of the students. And there's wide shots to show what the characters are doing, their actions. And like at one point, he draws a sword from a hat. I know it sounds weird, but he does that. And there's more or less a wide shot to show
Kind of
Voldemort's
ruined the magic trick now
reaction.
they removed the rabbit.
Yeah, the rabbit died and the hat's on. Let it go.
Oh no.
The more extensive budget of Harry Potter, they had cranes to hold the cameras up, all kinds of equipment available to them, whereas in Labyrinth, quite a few things weren't even invented then. So, obviously, a lot more higher quality film, and basically the only Labyrinth is at an overall disadvantage because it's a much older film with a much smaller budget from budget from 30 years ago.
In the Pirates of the Caribbean, they use like loads of different like locations and props as well. So like in comparison to Dark Crystal, they're very different but quite similar. Like Dark Crystal, they're in like an arena-based sort of thing in the scene I've chosen. They use swords, and they use swords in Pirates of the Caribbean, but in Pirates of the Caribbean they use more CGI stuff, which wasn't around in the 80s when Dark Crystal came out. So, yeah, that sort of happened. They use like these CGI ships as well, and forts he was in. I'll fucking punch you. What was he up to now? They use a load of 1700s clothing.
Keep going. I got this.
They use in Pirates of the Caribbean. They use 1700s clothing because it was based around the age of piracy in the 1700s. In the Dark Crystal, it was more of like puppets and stuff like that, like hand puppets and puppets on a string and stuff. That's about it. And they're not really like the same type. Like one of them is like completely different fantasy film than compared to the other one.
Costumes! In the Labyrinth, the costumes they kind of looked like a medieval British kind of thing from like the 11th century, but they've put like a magical spin on it. Whereas like in Harry Potter, most of the clothes are modern day, except for the Death Eaters who wear these like black robes of sorts and stuff. In Labyrinth, there's obviously Sarah, the protagonist, who isn't actually from this setting. She's from, Earth and America. So, cheers, Tom. She's wearing like 1980s modern day clothing. But like overall in that film, the clothing is very different. Like there's a snail who wore a scarf in one of them. I know that would not like make sense anywhere else but that film, which doesn't make sense. Whereas in Harry Potter, the Death Eaters are wearing, like I said, their robes to show that they're like an army, which based also because they're so dark clothing.
How does a robe symbolise an arm?
Because Death Eaters, as I said in Harry Potter, wearing dark clothing. They're all wearing the same robe, which shows it's a uniform, which means like they're more of like a fighting force. They're an army. Evil people. Get your head down there, son. We're rushing because there's people trying to come in the room. Okay. Voldemort himself is wearing his own different variation of a robe, but it's ragged and dirty, which to me tells me that he's an experienced character. He's done evil things, hence the dirt, and wearing his own, like, along with the rest of the characters like Harry Potter and Ron and the other one.
Hermione.
They're wearing their own individual clothes, which shows they're like an individual characters to the plot. They're not just like students. So the bigger clothes, more actors with their same uniforms, it's to do with their bigger budget, and the colour of clothing, for whatever reason it may be, I seem to think that it's to show that they're evil characters. In Labyrinth, this scene at least, the lighting was fairly high key, both the subject and the background well lit. As it's like a family friendly film, the brightness for the scene and most of the film is probably fairly important to the child having a nice time watching the film. Also goes along with like the innocent film. Whereas in Harry Potter, it has more of a low-key lighting to make the scene feel dark and uncomfortable and express the dire situation the characters are in. There's also a lot of danger and fear in the scene. Lighting helps a lot with that too. To go along with the lighting, there's also quite a few smoke machines there to basically make the atmosphere of the entire scene look dark and gloomy. The Death Eaters at this time like trying to get into the school, and for the school it's a very dark time, so this lighting reiterates that. For props, props aren't used a lot throughout the Labyrinth, or throughout the scene that I've chosen. There's only really the puppets themselves and the shields they're holding. That's the only two things that I can make out. Whereas in Harry Potter, almost every character is carrying a wand to reiterate that it's a school for magic where magical kids go and do magic stuff with sticks. And also, Neville, the character who basically this scene is for, has like his own speech. He pulls a sword out of this hat.
Yeah.
And so the props aren't totally essential to either scene. In the other parts of the film, props may be more important for this one. These two, not really. But as for the setting, the Labyrinth is, well, a maze that the protagonist, Sarah, has to navigate to go and rescue her brother from David Bowie. The labyrinth itself is like full of tests and weird things, but that's not really totally important.
It's just a giant maze, isn't it? A labyrinth's just a giant maze.
Mainly just a giant maze made of stone and a few magical things in the middle. Weird stairways and things.
Yep.
Hogwarts, the boarding school for these young wizards, it's been attacked and it's partially destroyed by an ongoing attack from these Death Eaters, so the buildings themselves looks quite gothic and what you'd expect from a well-off boarding school from England. But as it's under attack, quite a lot of the gothic buildings have been destroyed. There's just rocks and pieces of everything just lying up all around.
Stone.
It's been quite destroyed, but you can obviously still see it's quite a gothic setting.
Hurry up.
Just don't interrupt me.
It's not to die. Hurry up.
It's fucking hard to edit. If you were to go off these main gothic grounds, you'd see that some of the buildings are a bit unorthodox in that they don't really make sense. Like a building in real life wouldn't be able to stand up if it was like that. But for just this scene, the buildings are quite gothic. Most of it's been destroyed, it's covered in rubble. In the scene for the labyrinth, there's hardly any music playing. Although as the scene begins and she walks towards the gatekeepers, there is a little bit of electronic music going on for like the ambience in the background, but then that fades out and then the dialogue picks up. There's possibly non-diegetic sound in there where she's footsteps and whatnot, but I'm not too sure about that. The puppets, I don't know whether their dialogue is non-diegetic or not. It's kind of strange. I've never really had to think about that, but
I don't reckon it's non-diegetic.
I don't know. can't. It's probably non-diegetic adding afterwards, isn't it? Because puppets.
Yeah, good point actually.
Whereas in Harry Potter, there is a non-diegetic score of orchestral, so kind of to make the scene feel dark. But as Neville progresses with his speech, it seems to like uplift all the students and give them a little bit of hope, and the audience can feel that from the orchestral sound. When Voldemort sees Harry wake up towards the end of the scene, the score becomes lower again, but faster at a thrilling pace to show that the action has begun and things have become dangerous and exciting. And for a film franchise as big as Harry Potter, their budget can stretch quite far, so affording their own orchestral soundtrack isn't really too hard for them. In which case, The Labyrinth, not so much. Overall, for the two films, they're 25-30 years apart, and differences in production since this massive time gap clearly be seen, like the use of CGI in Harry Potter and the use of puppets and photography in The Labyrinth. It's fairly obvious that these films are 30 years apart, and yeah, that's basically it.
Fantasy genre definitely improved
It's gotten,
since the 80s, and since 30 years ago, the fantasy genre has blown up, literally.
it's got really good. It's like, yeah, it's really, really good.